There's something very intimate about giving yourself the first words of the day. Before emails, before notifications, before the world asks anything of you. 30 days ago, I decided to begin my mornings differently. I committed to writing every single day, not for content, not for my next book, not for productivity, but simply to see what would happen if I met myself on the page first. I'd been inspired by The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, a book that so many creatives swear by. And while I've known about it for years, I'd never properly committed to the practice at the heart of it, morning pages. So this was my 30-day experiment, and I have thoughts. But before I tell you what happened, let's talk about what morning pages actually are and why so many artists treat them like a creative lifeline. If you're new here, hey, hi, hello, my name is Melanie and I write cozy living books for real life and cozy fantasy for gentle escape. In The Artist's Way, morning pages are a daily writing practice done first thing in the morning. The idea is simple. You wake up, you write. You don't censor yourself. You don't edit. You don't try to be profound. You just let whatever is in your head spill out onto the page. They aren't meant to be pretty. They aren't meant to be poetic. They aren't even meant to be useful. They are meant to be clearing. Julia Cameron describes them almost like sweeping out the creative attic of your mind, getting rid of the cobwebs, the repetitive thoughts, the petty worries, the mental noise. It's less Dear Diary and more empty the mental junk drawer. And traditionally, it's 3 pages done longhand in a large notebook or loose leaf pages that are specifically US letter size. And you're encouraged not to reread them, at least not for a long time. It's not journaling for reflection. It's not writing for art. It's writing for release. So why do so many people credit morning pages with unlocking their creativity? There are a few key ideas behind the practice. First, they quiet the inner critic. When you're forced to keep writing, even if it's nonsense, eventually your perfectionism gets bored and wanders off. And what's left is something more honest. Second, they clear anxiety. If you've ever woken up with looping thoughts, things you forgot to do, conversations you're replaying, tiny worries that feel loud in the quiet of morning, writing them down drains their power, just a little. It's like sweeping the hearth before lighting the fire for the day. Third, they build creative muscle. Not because you're writing something brilliant, but because you're showing up. You're telling yourself, my thoughts matter enough to be written down. For those of us who create, whether that's novels, YouTube videos, art, business, or simply a new version of our lives, that act of daily self-trust is powerful. And I think that's why the practice has endured. Now, Here is where I gently diverged from the official doctrine. Because while the book recommends a certain page size and format, I decided instead to use my Erin Condren Hello Kitty 7x9 notebook. Not the large artist style pages, definitely not US letter size, not anything intimidating, just the notebook that made me want to sit down and write. And I committed to writing every single morning for 30 days, but not 3 pages, just 1. And that for me felt like the real promise. The first week was not magical. It was a lot of, I don't know what to write, this feels pointless, I'm tired, why am I doing this? Some mornings were just lists of worries, some were repetitive complaints. Some were basically me arguing with myself. And that's the part that people don't romanticize. The beginning is boring. But something interesting did happen. By around day 5 or 6, I noticed the same thoughts repeating, the same annoyances, the same insecurities, the same tiny fears. And seeing them on paper every day made them kind of harder to ignore. By the second week, the resistance softened. Not because I was writing beautifully, but because I stopped expecting to. The pages became a place where I could say things that I didn't even realise I was thinking. Business doubts, creative fears, little resentments, quiet desires. And when they appeared over and over again, I started to realise, oh, this is what's actually taking up space in my head. Morning pages became less about producing words and more about noticing patterns. And that was unexpectedly powerful. Around week 3, something shifted. Ideas started appearing. Not forced ideas, not I must come up with something brilliant ideas. Just gentle nudges, video concepts, small tweaks to my book, insights about how I want to structure my days. It felt less like brainstorming and more like uncovering, as though once the surface noise was cleared, the quieter thoughts finally had room to speak. And I don't want to over-romanticize it. It wasn't fireworks, but it was steady, calm and clear. By the final week, it felt normal, like brushing my teeth, like making a cup of tea. I noticed I was less reactive in the mornings, less likely to immediately grab my phone, less scattered. There was a softness to the start of my day. And for someone who creates for a living, who shares online, writes books, scripts videos, having that quiet buffer before the world enters is deeply grounding. So here's what I've learned. The magic isn't in the strictness, it's in the presence. Sometimes it's messy paragraphs. Sometimes it's just a stream of consciousness. Sometimes it's boring details and to-dos. Sometimes it's just, I'm tired and I don't want to do this. And I don't punish myself for that. Creative rituals should support your life, not control it. Using my smaller 7x9 notebook actually helped. It felt cozy, approachable, personal. Not like I was facing 3 looming, demanding pages before I'd even had a cup of coffee. I think that's important because if a ritual feels intimidating, we avoid it. If it feels welcoming, we return. Yes, they helped, but not in the dramatic way you expect. It didn't erase fear. It didn't suddenly make me wildly disciplined. It didn't solve every creative block. But it did clear the mental clutter. It helped me to see patterns in my thinking. It kind of gave me small, consistent creative sparks. It created a gentler start to my mornings. And perhaps most importantly, it reminded me that my inner world deserves attention before the outer world gets access to me. That feels quietly revolutionary. Morning pages didn't turn me into a different person, but they gave me 30 mornings of listening to myself. And in a world that constantly demands output, productivity, noise, choosing to sit in silence and write whatever is true feels almost radical. Will I continue? Yes. Not rigidly, not perfectly, but gently. Because creativity, at least for me, thrives in gentleness. If you've ever felt creatively blocked or overstimulated or unsure of your next step, maybe the answer isn't to push harder. Maybe it's to sit down tomorrow morning, open a notebook that you love, and begin with, I don't know what to write, and see what happens. If you've tried morning pages, tell me your experience. If you haven't, would you commit to 7 days? I would love to know. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.